Hello, and welcome to this episode of Q Primary Presents Intentional Tech. I am your host, Kayla Harlow, a former first grade teacher, ed tech advocate, yet limited screen time parent. Today's guest is Jake Miller, author of Educational Duct Tape and Ed Tech Integration Mindset, host of the Ed Tech News Brief and Edu Duct Tape podcast, speaker, and sharer of Edu Gifts or GIFs. You can find Jake Miller at Jake Miller Tech or jakemiller.net. Jake's day job is a personalized learning specialist, and he spent a previous 5 years as a technology integration specialist, and then 14 years in the classroom prior to that. Jake's favorite job, however, is being a dedicated husband and full-time father. Today's episode is going to touch on how to avoid shiny object syndrome and cut down on overwhelm when selecting what technology tools to use in the classroom. A bonus to this episode is going to be a holiday gift guide that you can include on your teacher wish list when parents ask, "What would you like for Christmas?" So, without further ado, hi, Jake. Thanks for coming on today. We are so excited to talk about overwhelm when choosing your technology tools and how to stray away from that shiny object syndrome. Post-pandemic, it has been wonderful what technology companies have provided us with in regards to resources, but teachers can face a little bit of paralysis when it comes to choosing the tool to use. So or how can educators go about deciding what technologies to learn about in the first place?
Yeah. So first, Kayla, thanks for having me on. I'm so excited to be here and chat with you and the primary teachers listening. I'm so excited to have them connecting. And some of my favorite people out there are primary teachers. It's such amazing work. I used to get to say I had my own kids that were in the primary grades. Now they're all too old. My youngest is a third grader now. That
Oh,
doesn't
no.
count as primary anymore.
Well,
Can
it
I count?
depends where
Can I
you're
count
at.
him?
We can
Okay.
count them. We can count them.
Okay. He's my little guy.
Oh.
Yeah, but so I think the hardest part about making those decisions is that there's so many things out there, right? You
Yes.
alluded to that paralysis, and as you know, I talk about this idea of this paralysis in my book, Educational Duct Tape, and I've talked about it a lot on the Educational Duct Tape podcast. A cognitive psychologist or behavioral psychologist, I don't know, some fancy term, named Barry Schwartz talks about what he calls the paradox of choice. And the paradox of choice is when we have so many options to choose from, we're not liberated by all those options. We're paralyzed by all those options. He gives a great example in his TED Talk and in some of his writings and things like that, of a famous study done by two psychologists, Sheena Iyengar and Mark Lepper. It's called the JAM study. That's what people call it, as a JAM study. And in this study, they found that what they did was they set up this table at a grocery store with jams for people to sample. And during alternating hours, they changed how many different jams they had out to sample. And they found that during the times when they had 24 jams to try, 1.5 times as many people tried a jam. So more people were attracted to all of those choices. We're like, ooh, look at all those choices, right? And that reminds me of those sessions at an ed tech conference where you're like, 50 tools to use in your classroom today. Everybody's like, wow, 50 tools. I'm going to go learn about all of them. But then the other part of that study was that they found that on those days when there was only when there were 24 jams to sample, 3% of people purchased a jam. At the other times, they had 6 jams to sample, and 30% of people purchased a jam. So 10 times as many purchased when there were only 6 jams to sample. So even though lots of options seems great, what's actually better is a small group of options that we could really evaluate well. So I think it's hard for teachers to decide what tools to select and choose for their classrooms. I think in the primary grades, one thing that's easy to do first is to take out all of the options that aren't well suited to little kiddos, right? Yes. To take out those super complex tools. And then that takes away some of that paralysis. It takes away some of that overwhelm. That's like going out to dinner with my parents who don't want sushi, right? Who don't
Mm-hmm.
want seafood, who don't want those kinds of things. So when we're picking dinner with them, we eliminate options off of our list, and that makes it a little bit easier to pick, And when I'm with my kids don't really want to go to a brewery for dinner. I keep trying to get them to want to go to a brewery for dinner. They don't want to go to a brewery for dinner. So that eliminates some of those options off that list. And so with primary school teachers, like our kindergarten, or first or second, maybe our third grade teachers, they can eliminate some of those tools that are a little too complex for them and take them off there. But then there's still so many tools. And so the next step is to go, what am I really trying to do right now? What is a problem in my classroom? What's a goal that I have? What's something that I've identified that I could do better at? What is a goal, and what tools relate to that goal, right? Because there's lots of those shiny objects you mentioned out there. Like maybe you just heard about Blue-Kit, which is the newest, coolest game, like gamified kind of like
I haven't even heard of it.
class
So now I
You've never
need,
heard of Blue-Kit? Oh, it's so much
no,
fun.
now I need
But
to go check it.
don't get too tempted. It's just a shiny
Yeah.
object. Blue-Kit
Yeah.
is really fun for reviewing concepts and playing games in the classroom. But Kayla, if you're already using Gimkit or Quizzes or Quizlet Live or Kahoot and having lots of success with it, then you could ignore Blue-Kit. I do think it's a little bit better than them, but still, you could ignore it. It's just a new shiny object. You don't need that one. So we can ignore those things that don't match a goal we have. If you've already got a tool for that, you can ignore that one, right? So focus on what you really need right now.
Yeah, I completely agree. And one bit of advice I give my educators is try and look at tools that can check more than one box. So for primary educators, the seesaw of being a digital portfolio, also tracking, their assessments and things like that are a way to look about it. And we will link some of the recommended primary level resources in the show notes. But I also noticed that you had kind of talked about too much pressure when making those decisions. That can also be, aside from too many choices. Can you talk a little bit about kind of relating to that pressure that educators are feeling right now in regards to making those choices?
Yeah. So we'll stick with the restaurant idea.
Okay.
My brother-in-law and his wife and my nephew were in town over the weekend we live in Ohio, they live in Florida, so they rarely come and visit. And we were going out to dinner with them on Sunday night, and it was like, where do we go for dinner? And we're like, it's gotta be a good dinner. This is our only dinner with them. We've got to pick the coolest place in Ohio to show them for dinner. We ended up at Applebee's, by the way, Kayla. I was so disappointed we ended up at Applebee's. Not a great choice.
No.
How did that happen?
It was easy.
Right, I guess so.
Right?
So somebody who is from the Applebee's family is listening right now, and they're mad at us. But so it was a lot of pressure because we felt like this was our only chance, right? And we get that feeling in our classrooms too, because we're like, we only get 180 days with these kids. If I lose a day, what am I going to do? I'm going to fall behind on my pacing guide, and I'm going to lose this day of instructional time, which are just such crazy, irrational thoughts. I've done it in my classroom before too, but I think that the risks, the rewards outweigh the risks in that situation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you try a new tech tool in class, it crashes and burns, and you end up never using it again. Yeah, you lost 30 minutes of class with your students, but you gained an understanding of what kind of tool you really need, right? So you're going to make a more informed decision on the next one, and you've eliminated that one from your list. And you've taken that first step, which is often the hardest step in doing something new. And more importantly, your students have seen you take a risk, right? Because you could have that talk with them and go,
that's
like,
what I
guys,
was going to say.
yeah, guys,
Learning
I thought this was going to go
together.
really well.
Yeah.
I thought this was going to be the tool for us. I thought we needed a tool that would help us review our addition facts or whatever. I thought this was going to be the right one, and it wasn't. And them seeing you having that growth mindset as a professional, just like you want them to have it as a student, I think is beneficial. So did you lose 25 minutes of instructional time? Yes. But look at what you gained, not just for your students, but also for you and your practice. And I think that's huge.
I agree. And I think that reasonable expectations when implementing any new tools in the classroom for both yourself as the educator and your students is so important. And I always told my teachers to focus on the procedures and the process initially versus the content, because if you're trying to push and get those assessment, data initially when you first are introducing something, then you're going to be overwhelmed. They're going to be overwhelmed when we're talking about formative assessments.
Mm-hmm.
But if you leave room for just kind of that creation and exploration, and I found a lot of my 6-year-olds would problem solve for me.
Yeah.
So kind of having that growth mindset on both angles when first implementing, and being okay to fail. It's,
Yeah.
I don't know where it came from. Someone, not myself, said it, but failing is just your first attempt in learning.
Yeah, for sure.
Um,
For sure. On
so,
the point you were saying there about kind of trying it out kind of in a low stakes way when you use these new
mhm,
technologies, John Carippo is the first person I heard it from, who John's
Edu
in your neck
protocols.
of the woods and used to be a part
Yeah.
of Q, Edu Protocols. John told me once when he was on my podcast, he talked about lowering the cognitive load. In other
Yes.
words, he says when you do something new in your classroom, whether it's an Edu protocol or a new strategy or a new technology tool, that in and of itself is a cognitive
Is a
load for your
cognitive.
learners. So he says, don't then teach a new academic concept within that. Teach, like,
Yes.
have them talk about their favorite food or their favorite TV show or their favorite vacation spot or their family, because there's no cognitive load there. There's just
Mm-hmm.
excitement and things they already know about. So he says, when you bring in something new, do it in a way that doesn't have any other kind of cognitive load pieces in it. So it lowers that cognitive load. And then once they know how to maybe draw a picture in Seesaw, for example, to your mention of Seesaw,
Mm-hmm.
once they know how to draw a picture of their family in Seesaw, then you could have them circle Ohio on a map, or whatever it
Yes.
might be.
I completely agree. And that's a much better articulated way of talking about the cognitive load in regards to when we first start off. I always encourage
Mm-hmm.
educators to take the first month of school and just really, really delve into those systems and processes. And
Yeah.
it will buy you time, even if you feel like you're losing time. It will buy you time in the long run, because those children will be so well in tuned with what's expected of them that they'll be able to dive deeper into the content. So I completely agree. So we kind of already talked about how educators can feel less overwhelmed by all of the tools that are out there. But something that really struck me in your book was the idea of edu GIF, and you
Mm.
clarified as well, once I got further in there, that it is GIF with a hard G. Is that
That's
research
that's
based?
that's research on my own opinion. Is that research?
Okay.
Is my own opinion a research?
No, but I'll take it, because when I was reading in the book, it's constantly the question. And then I saw later on that you clarified that you think it's the hard G. But anyways,
RG for me, for sure.
can you talk a little bit about, I know how beneficial it can be for teachers, those little snapshots, but if they also want to create them, where they could find resources that could help create an edu GIF?
You can say GIF if you want to, Kayla.
I
It's
don't
okay.
know. I always say
To me,
GIF
it's just a
GIF.
peanut butter.
I include both.
You just want to make sure nobody's offended, so you say
It's that
GIF, GIF,
decision
right?
making. Okay.
Yes. Tomato, tomato, I guess.
Yeah.
So when I talk about GIFs in the book, I should point out for the listeners that I don't think that GIFs are like everybody should use GIFs in their classrooms. I don't think that's true of any technology. I don't think there's any certain technology that all of us should be using. I think
Mhm.
our learners benefit from us using what's best for us, whatever works best
Yeah.
for us. And for some
Most
of us,
fluid and
some
natural.
GIFs work that. Yeah, for
Mhm.
sure. And for some of us, a GIF is that thing. So I talk about in the book how I started off, way back when I started trying to, support people with educational technology. I started making YouTube videos, and now I can get some viewers on my YouTube videos. But back in the day, those YouTube videos were getting a handful of views, and I was like, this is a problem. Nobody's coming in and watching my videos. And so what I identified was that there were too many hurdles. People were,
Mhm.
they had to click on the video. They had to have time to watch the video. They had to plug in headphones to watch the video. And so I found that if I could turn into a GIF that auto played, that was 40 seconds long, that looped at the end, that didn't have audio, people were more likely to watch them. And so that was just an example of using the tech as a tool to solve the problem I had. So you asked about how they can make them. So I make mine in Camtasia. That's where I make mine. Now I'm going to guess not very many of your listeners are going to run out and do that, because Camtasia is $170 or something
Yeah.
like that. So probably not. Some other options. the same company that makes Camtasia, TechSmith, has a program called Snagit. Snagit makes GIFs, and Snagit's about $20 or $30. So that's more realistic. Screencastify, if users are Screencastify users, you can export videos as GIFs in there. And what's nice about that is, let's say you need to remind your students how to log into Seesaw, because you mentioned Seesaw earlier. You could make a quick GIF, just like you're making a screencast of logging into Seesaw, just do it with no audio, export it as a GIF, and then have it looping up on your dry erase board, not your dry erase board, your smart board, or looping on your website to remind them how to do that, and they can go and see that there. So we record it just like a screencast, but then we export it as a GIF instead of as a video. So it's a small file size, it's easy to view, it loops. But yeah, so Screencastify, WeVideo makes GIFs. There are a couple of other tools where you could take a GIF that you recorded somewhere else and export it in it. But if anybody's listening and they're like, those tools don't work for me, give me another one, Jake, just send me an email and I'll give you another one.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah. And I'm going to add in there, Canva has really stepped up
Yes,
their
yeah.
game. And so it's really easy, even if you're just doing slides, consecutive slides, to, move your arrow around and then just save it as a GIF. That's another one as well. I'm a huge Canva fan. My last question for you, in your book, I love the analogy that you made, about contemporary fashion trends. And I'm writing a book about contemporary fashion trends, and it's crossed out.
Mhm.
And it's ed tech is tough because fashions or ed tech tools change faster than authors can write and publishers can publish. And I'm seeing that as I'm going through my ISTE certification, all of the research behind ed tech, there's just a lapse because it changes so quickly. So how can educators keep up with all of the changes in the different tools that are available?
Well, so I think the important thing here is to understand that you can't. You can't keep up with all of
Yeah.
them. Just like I can't keep up with all of the fashion trends that my own 3 children are trying to maintain. They're doing a great job keeping up with it. But you know what? My 13-year-old son, he is worried about the fashion trends that 13-year-olds like, right?
Yes.
That's all he's got to worry about. And so a teacher should only have to worry about the changes in the educational technologies that they're using or that they might be using, right? So you mentioned Canva before, Kayla, and I, by the way, didn't know that Canva exported. Well, I've never exported a GIF in Canva. I knew it did. I've never tried it. And I'm like, that's something I need to try, because
Yeah.
Canva is a tool that I use and a tool that I support people using and that I like a lot. But if somebody tells me that something changed in some other tool that's kind of not on my radar, I'm like, meh. I'm a little more
Yes.
in tune to it because that's kind of what I do, is support people in this work. But a teacher should say, meh, I'm not going to worry about that because I don't have the bandwidth to worry about that, right? So my son,
Absolutely.
13-year-old, he's all hip to the 13-year-old trends right now, but he doesn't care about what his dad wants to wear to work, right? That's not it. That's not the trends he has to
Maybe he
worry
does. You
about,
don't
right?
know.
I don't know. Maybe he's probably
Just
judging
kidding.
me for sure, but but those aren't the trends he has to be aware of, right? He
Yeah.
doesn't have to worry about the trends that my wife has to follow to be hip to her other mom friends, right? He doesn't have to worry about that. He has to worry about his own. So for teachers, I think you worry about just those tools that you're tuned into. There's a lot of ways to do it. Most of those tools have a blog where they post what's new. I
Mhm.
tend to subscribe to the email newsletters for those tools. Sometimes you get a little bit of spammy content from them advertising stuff, but they also send you when they make updates to them. And then social media is great. Instagram or Twitter or TikTok or wherever you're at is great. And then not shameless plug here, do a show now called the EdTech News Brief, where I share all of the news that I think matters to teachers about educational technologies. So Canva recently added whiteboard feature. I
Mhm.
cover that in the upcoming episode, so that people know about that. So there's a lot of different places out there to learn about that stuff. But what's important to understand, the biggest thing is only worry about the tool